Hello, BookTube. Cheers. I am here to do an announcement video, and this is for New Worlds November. If you hashtag New Worlds November, you'll see a bunch of videos, announcement videos. And this is the brainchild of the Bookish Bryants. And there's a bunch of co-hosts for this. I'm one of them. The other ones are, obviously, Bookish Bryants, Steve Donoghue, BNB Books, the Bookclectic, Mindy's Book Journey, Shawn D Standfast, James Holder, Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, the Paperback Junky, Tom at LA Books, and David Wardrop. Quite a good list, and quite a lot of experience with sci-fi there, or SF, or whatever you want to call it. So it's a month-long event, and the interesting thing is it's dealing with short fiction. Science fiction has a huge history of short fiction. In fact, when I started with science fiction reading in the late 60s, I really got into it in the 1970s and all that. It was primarily short fiction that I read. The digest magazines, Fantasy and Science Fiction, Galaxy, Worlds of If, all sorts of them. And then later on, Isaac Asimov's. I still get Analog, I still get Asimov's, and I still get Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. So, excuse me. So we're going to have themes. It's a month long. And the themes are, week 1 is aliens. Week 2 is robots, or AI. Week 3 is time travel, and week 4 is dystopian, apocalyptic. Of those, my least favorite would be time travel. Many of you know I'm a big Star Trek fan. Those are the episodes I can't stand. I don't like time travel stories that much. I know a lot of people disagree with me about that, and that's fine. Everybody has their own taste, but they just don't work for me very well, so I'm going to struggle a little, but hopefully I'll discover something that changes my mind, and that's the advantage of short fiction. Now, the short fiction, you can do short stories, which I will primarily focus on. You can do novelettes, novellas, whatever you want to call them. You can go all the way up to, I think they said the limit's 250 pages. So, short novels. But I think with that is if you're just reading science fiction and you want to get in the comments down below, that's fun, right? Then you're a part of it. So read whatever you want. Obviously, you're going to do that anyway, right? So I thought I'd show some of the sources I'm going to use. As each week comes along, I'll pick my stories then, because who knows what kind of mood I'll be in or what I'll run into. Researching and finding the stories half the fun. I know a lot of the typically, anthologized. And so I'll be looking for some different stuff, but I'll go with some classics too. And I hope I'll do some new ones. So I've got the magazines up there, and I've got some catching up to do on those anyway. I always do. I got a pile of comic books there I haven't read either. So there's always stuff around here that I can grab. So I thought I'd show you some of the sources so you can get some ideas. Some of the older anthologies, especially if they're in Science Fiction Book Club or an old paperbacks, you can find pretty cheap. And you just hit your charity shops. You can do the internet if you're not too picky on condition. And you just never know where you're going to run into them. You don't have to buy a bunch of new stuff. A lot of the older stories, but really old stories, are on Project Gutenberg for free. So you'll see them, they'll have a cover of Thrilling Wonder Stories or whatever, but there'll be one story. So you can find an author you like and then go from there. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how I'm going to go about this. It's not going to be in any particular order because I just piled them on the desk, and everything's piled on this desk right now. So if I missed any hosts on that list because people are joining as hosts, it's not intended to be a slight. I'm thrilled you're here, and we can always update this. So, but yeah, hashtag New Worlds November, and it makes it easy for everybody to find it. So I'm working on a project with Shawn D. Standfast. And it's a future history project, and it's focused on Isaac Asimov. There's been other future histories, such as Heinlein made a very famous future history, and they're not the only ones. And so one of the volumes I've got, and I've got several that go along with it, Robot Dreams, I'm not going to go through all of them. They deal with robots. So there's tons of short stories in here. I've read probably all of them, but I might revisit some of those. But that's a good source for you. You can get this book online right now, I think Book Depository and a few places like that. Love the covers. I'm not so sure I'm thrilled with the paper quality. But the design of the cover is pretty cool, and all the Asimovs that they have on there matches. It'd be nice to get. Some of the magazines. And this is a very famous anthology. This is a John W. Campbell Memorial Anthology, and this is Astounding. Pretty legendary cover there. This is a final tribute to John W. Campbell. It was edited by Harry Harrison. And this is, obviously, it's a Kelly Freas cover, which I should have said. But many of you know that. This is from 1973, so this has an introduction, The Father of Science Fiction by Isaac Asimov. Not sure that may be overstating it a bit, but he was important. Then you have Lodestar by Poul Anderson, Theo Timeline to the Stars by Asimov. They always have words like this for me. Something Up There Likes Me, Alfred Bester. Then you have Hal Clement. You have L. Sprague de Camp, Gordon R. Dixon, who I really like. Brothers, which was one of the great stories. I just love that. Harry Harrison, obviously. Mac Reynolds. Clifford D. Simak, who is Shawn D. Standfast's favorite writer, and with good reason. George O. Smith, Theodore Sturgeon, and more. So you can always find stuff like this. If you find this, grab it, because, like I say, even that story, Brothers, is fantastic. Another one here is edited by Damon Knight, another very famous science fiction writer, and this is The Shape of Things. Right here, sort of a charming, I've got some library tape on it to hold it together. Sometimes these old paperbacks don't take a ton of rereading, but if you can find them, they're fun. So this has Henry Kuttner, James Blish. Star Trek fans know him as the person who did the novelizations, or I'm not sure they're full novels, but Charles Harness, Maury Leinster, Theodore Sturgeon again, Ray Bradbury, C.M. Kornbluth, L. Sprague de Camp, A. Vanvo, Anthony Boucher, who was a famous editor and a brilliant critic, not just of science fiction, but of mystery stories. For the New York Times, I believe. John D. MacDonald, another famous for his Travis McGee novels. So that's fun. Another one here is edited by another science fiction writer. See, these things are a big deal. The Mirror of Infinity, edited by Robert Silverberg, a critic's anthology of science fiction. And I don't know if you agree with everything in any of these anymore, but that's really not the point. You have H.G. Wells' The Star, John W. Campbell, Twilight, which has a foreword by Aldous Budrys, which is interesting. All these have forewords by somebody else. Nightfall by Isaac Asimov, which I love. Louis Paget's Private Eye. Arthur C. Clarke, The Sentinel, which is very famous. Robert Sheckley, The Specialist. James Bliss, Common Time. Cordwainer Smith, The Game of Rat and Dragon, with a foreword by Kingsley Amis, which is really cool. Robert Heinlein, All You Zombies. J.G. Ballard. Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And Borges, Library of Babel, and more. So this thing's in rough shape, but I could get through some short stories out of that if I had to. Then there's these anthologies that run multi-year. They used to be big with Terry Carr. David Knight did one. There was a bunch of them. So this one's Year, and Gardner Does Wall, most famously, which I didn't pull down, but I have a bunch of them. Which way? Right out of the camera. Those things went on forever, and they're wonderful. Big old things. Maybe I'll just reach up and grab them right before I get done. So this one's one I have quite a few of, and this is David G. Hartwell and Catherine Kramer, Year's Best SF. Again, old paperbacks. I do have a hardback of one of them. Let's see what we. This one is from 2005. We have Bradley Denton, Gregory Benford, Glenn Grant, Terry Bisson, Pamela Sargent, Gene Wolfe, Ken Liu, Ray Volkovich. I'm not going to read them all. There's a ton of them. Jack McDevitt, Robert Reed. Neil Asher. So, yeah, quite a few in here. Then here is a 2-volume set that Steve sent me. These are both edited by Mike Ashley. I know that Shawn D. Standfast has these. I'm sure probably other folks do. I was thrilled to get these from him. They do have short stories from the periods covered. What do we got? 1926 to 35 and 36 to 45. So I'll see if I find something in those. Then if you want a magazine, this is the Eureka Years, Boucher, who we just talked, and McComas Magazine is Fantasy and Science Fiction, 1949 to 1954. So it talks about the magazine, but it also gives example with short stories. So let me see if they say who they have in here. They have Theodore Sturgeon, Ray Bradbury, L. Sprague de Camp, and Fletcher Pratt, Alfred Bester, Richard Matheson, Chad Oliver, Damon Knight, Manly Wade Wellman, Ron Goulart, Isaac Asimov, Poole Anderson, Philip K. Dick, Gordon R. Dixon, Arthur Porges, Andre Norton, Randall Garrett, so quite a few, and there's more. I didn't read them all. Another thing you can do is go to the author themselves, like I showed you Asimov with robots. Here's the collected stories of Werner Vinge. So who knows? You dig in and you see what you got. This one was a Tom Doherty book, and it came out in 2001. So I'll just read you where some of them were published. Analog, Worlds of If, Analog Again, Far Frontiers by BNB Books, so it's probably an anthology. Analog, New Worlds SF, Analog, Stellar One, which was probably an anthology. If I'm wrong, just tell me. And Analog, but see if we got anybody else. He did a lot in Analog. Article published in Nature, that's pretty cool. So that, yeah, you just go to a particular author. And then you'll get these retrospectives. This one's in rough shape. This is a fantastic volume. I think, no, you can't see it. I lined this camera up wrong. I should have aimed it towards the sci-fi. There's multiple volumes of the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. This one's edited by Robert Silverberg. And you're probably going to have a hard time. I'll hold it up for a minute, so if you wanted to stop your camera and try to read through that thing. I have loved this to death. Has my favorite short story, which people get sick of because it is anthologized a lot, but I love it, The Martian Odyssey by Stanley Weinbaum. Has Twilight Again by John W. Campbell, so you'll see a lot of these get repeated, right? Because they're good, though. Roads Must Roll by Heinlein. Nightfall by Asimov. We've already seen that in another volume. So you got Sturgeon, A. Vanvo, Lewis Paget, Mimsy Were the Borrow Groves, which is a wonderful story. Huddling Place by Clifford D. Simak. You have Frederick Brown, Murray Leinster, Judith Merrill, Cordwainer Smith, Scanners Live in Vain, great story. Ray Bradbury, C.M. Kornbluth, Richard Matheson, Fritz Leiber, James Bush again, Arthur C. Clarke, The 9 Billion Names of God. I would put that under Apocalyptic. And if you've read it, you'll probably understand. You might not agree with me, but you might understand why I did it. Jerome Bixby, I may reread that. I haven't read it in years. Alfred Bester, Damon Knight, Daniel Keyes, Flowers for Algernon. Many folks have read that. And Roger Zelazny, A Rose for Ecclesiastes. Another good one. Then you get analysis here. I know this is edited again by Robert Silverberg. It's called Strange Gifts, 8 Stories of Science Fiction. These are nowhere near all the ones I have. I just pulled out a bunch for fun. Alfred Bester, Philip K. Dick, Gordon R. Dixon, Horace Gold, who was connected with Galaxy Magazine, Ari Lafferty, Frank Belknap Long, Chris Neville, and Robert Silverberg. He's going to include one of his stories, right? Donald Walheim edited a series called the Annual World's Best SF. Now, if you can find these in the old science fiction book club or whatever, grab them. They're full of treasures. Donald A. Walheim is Daw Books, right? So this is, you have Ian Watson, Gardner Dozois, who wrote one with Jack Dan and Michael Swanwick. Lucius Shepard, Sailing to Byzantium by Robert Silverberg, which was fantastic. You have Harlan Ellison with Virgil Odom at the East Pole. You have Connie Willis, Frederick Pohl, Fermion Frost, and C.J. Sheriff. So good there. A themed anthology. I know I'm going on forever. The Seven Deadly Sins of Science Fiction, edited by Asimov, Waugh, and Greenberg. Martin H. Greenberg is one you'll see around a lot doing these types of things. So they'll take sloth, lust, envy, pride, anger, gluttony, avarice, and covetousness. So in here you have Jack Vance, Judith Merrill, Henry Slazer, Isaac Asimov, Roger Zelazny, Fred Pohl, Poole Anderson, and Michael G. Coney. Sort of a cool idea. Then you'll have ones that I really like, and I used to have one called Very Large Array that had George Railroad Martin in it. I don't have it anymore. It was like New Mexico science fiction. This one's Portland, as in Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine, in this city of weird. So you can find things like this. These are always fun. I don't know all the authors in here, but there's nothing wrong with that. Find somebody new. And this is Forest Avenue Press out of Portland, Oregon. And this came out in 2016. So, yeah, you might find a gem, right? Our prompts, ask us about aliens, and I told you about the Digest magazine Analog. Well, here's Aliens from Analog, and there'll be short stories about aliens. Stanley Schmidt, Maury Leinster, Alison Tellior, Lawrence O'Donnell, Stanley Schmidt again, Eric Frank Russell, Catherine McLean, Paul Ash, Poole Anderson, Frederick Brown, Eric Frank Russell, and Mark Steitler. Who knows? Another magazine-centered one is Galaxy Magazine, 30 Years of Innovative Science Fiction. Wonderful volume. Who edited this? Fred Pohl, Martin H. Greenberg again, and Joseph D. Orlander. And let me grab one of those Gardner Dozois. I'll just show you one of these big floppies. Right here. You've probably seen them around. Grab them. You never know. You might find something you really like. This one has 29 stories. Let me see who we got here. So it's 2003, I guess. It has Charles Strauss, Nancy Kress, John Varley, Judith Moffat, Kristen Catherine Rush, Walter John Williams, Paolo Baccagalupi, which I always have trouble saying, Michael Swanwick, Werner Revenge, Harry Turtle, I don't know, Robert Reed, Paul D. Filippo, Terry Dowling, Terry Bisson. So, yeah, this one's, the pages are getting a little discolored, but they're fun to dig through. They're curated little collections. So, anyhow, so that's, like I say, hashtag New Worlds November. Thank you to the Bookish Bryants for coming up with this idea. Now I got to put all these books back on the shelf, but I probably should go through them first and start picking out stuff for the first prompt. But and we'll see how I do on time travel. Not a huge fan. So thank you, BookTube, and I hope you're all well.